Hey everyone, Third here with Boffer Basics, and this is part 2 of 2 of our chainmail series. In our first video we talked about materials, tools, and the pros and cons of making or buying your rings, and general concepts of chainmail. So if you need to refresh yourself on any of that, you can check out our first video here. In this video we're going to be talking about actually assembling European 4-in-1 and some tips and tricks for making that process a little faster and easier. If you're going to be making a chainmail hauberk, which is what we're going over in this video, you're going to need a couple of measurements to get yourself started. And once you've got those, you can pop over to this nifty tool here from the Ring Lord to figure out how many rings you're going to need to make your shirt. Your first measurement is going to be your width, or your chest measurement. You're going to need to figure out exactly how big your shirt needs to be. So puff your chest out really wide, square your shoulders up, take a deep breath, and really flex hard. And then take a cloth measuring tape or have someone help you and measure around your chest. That chest measurement is going to determine the width of your chainmail. So in this shirt here, it's how wide this is going to be. To that measurement, you're going to add 4 to 6 inches. This is going to account for expansion and movement, any layers that you may be wearing underneath it, such as your gambeson, which we talked about in the first video, and so on. You don't want your shirt to be too baggy because then it's going to slap against you, it's going to chafe, and it's just going to not look very good. It's going to be uncomfortable to wear. Conversely, you don't want it too small because if your rings are constantly tight and under pressure, you're going to be bursting rings, it's going to be a pain to get in and out of, and it's just going to scratch you all up. Once you've got those measurements, pop over and figure out how many rings that you need, and we can get ready to get started. I'm going to give you some examples of different methods of assembling chain and a few tips and tricks here and there to try and ease the process a bit. So, let's get started. Okay, European 4-in-1 is a weave where we have one ring always has 4 other rings connecting to it. And you can see that repeated throughout the entirety of the weave. In assembling it, you've got a couple of options. You can either build strips of it, like this piece here, and connect them, such as like this. Oops, that would be more like that, wouldn't it? Or you can build onto your chainmail piece by piece. So the first method we'll cover is building strips, which is probably the fastest and most efficient way of doing it. Of course, however you decide to do it is completely up to you. You want to do whatever's going to be best for you. So for assembling these strips, we're always going to start with a piece of 4-in-1. So in assembling 4-in-1, we use 2 types of rings. You've got open rings, which are these rings here with a small gap in them. And then you've got your closed rings. Now closed rings can be rings that are actually closed, or they can be rings that have this slight offset. Whether you've bought or made your rings, when they get clipped off the coil, this is how they're going to come off, with this slight little gap here. But for the purpose of assembling the chain, it's considered a closed ring. So to make a piece of 4-in-1, you take one open ring and place 4 closed rings on it. And then you close up your open ring. Now you have 2 choices again for closing your open ring. You can use 2 pairs of pliers and close it like so, or you can do it one-handed. With the one-handed technique, I think it saves a lot of time because you don't have to worry about picking up your second set of pliers. It can be a little difficult to get the hang of, but once you do, it really speeds things along. So I talked just a second ago about having truly closed rings and then the closed rings with a gap. And here's the benefit of having the truly closed rings. They're already closed. There's nothing more needed to be done. But with the ones that have the gap, imagine all 3 of these were like that. You have to stop and close each individual ring. And here's that one-handed technique here. And then you get to move on to making your next piece of 4-in-1 or adding your next rings on. You can close all of your rings individually pretty quickly, a lot more quickly than closing them individually once they're already on this one ring here. So I'll cover that a little bit later, but it's definitely something I would consider doing to speed your process along. So now we've got our first piece of 4-in-1, which is also called a frog. It looks like a frog getting ready to leap. So from here you can either continue to add on other pieces of 4-in-1, or you can do it piece by piece. For adding other pieces of 4-in-1, you'll make additional pieces of 4-in-1, and then you're going to line them up so that the weave continues. It'll go together pretty naturally. If it looks weird and bulbous or something like that, you know you've got it wrong. All you really need to do is make sure your center rings are facing the same direction and just slide them together. And then you're going to need an open ring to stitch it. So in assembling pieces of 4-in-1, you're always going to go down, down, up, up. If you're right-handed, it's easier if your up ring is on your right side. Left-handed, I have no idea. Good luck with that. Figure it out. But you're going to take your open ring and you're going to go down through your top ring here and down through the ring beneath it. Then you'll come over, come up through that ring there, and then up through that ring that would be over top of it. And you can see it makes this kind of pattern where it's got 2 rings on the outside. Does that show up okay? And 2 rings on the inside. And then you can either pick up 2 pairs of pliers or rotate your ring, brace it against your weave, and give it a little pinch to close it up like so. And now you can see that your strip here is starting to take shape. You can just add pieces of or more pieces of 4-in-1, more frogs together, and just keep building your strips until you've got a long strip, and then add strips together to make your bigger body of chainmail. Or once you've gotten started, you can add piece by piece. Again, it's really just a matter of what's fastest for you. If you're going to just keep adding on pieces, you're just going to take an open ring, 2 closed rings, and you're going to pinch it on there, and you're going to assemble it just like you did the other piece, and pinch and close, and then you're just going to keep doing that until you get your strip to your desired length. So again, I don't know that there's really any difference as far as speed goes in doing this. Oops, I only added 1 ring there, we'll have to add another. It's just a matter of what personally works best for you. Once you've gotten your strip as long as you need it, though, one benefit of doing the frogs is that you can figure out exactly how many frogs you need, or pieces of 4-in-1 that you're going to need to make your strips. So if you take a strip and lay it out, you can figure out how many pieces of 4-in-1 are in it by counting the center rings, dividing by 2. So in this piece here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 center rings. So we would divide that by 2, and then the larger number would go to the number of 4-in-1, because we always have 1 more 4-in-1 than we do rings. So if we've got 5 pieces here, that means that we've got 3 pieces of 4-in-1 and 2 connecting rings. So 4-in-1, connecting ring, 4-in-1, that's 2, connecting ring, 2 of them, and then third piece of 4-in-1. So 3 4-in-1, 2 connecting rings. And then you could say you did your entire width measurement and figured out how many 4-in-1 there are. Then you would know exactly how many pieces of 4-in-1 to go ahead and really quickly assemble. And then you would just, there with your open rings, and throw them on the ground, and then lace up or lace together your pieces of 4-in-1, or just sit here and add on your additional frogs, just like so. Now, getting the frogs to lace up together correctly can be a little bit of a pain. For example, you got to get it through all 4 rings easily, and in the time it takes you to do this, you already probably could have added your 1 open ring and 2 closed rings and been on to grabbing the next piece. So find out what's going to work best for you. Once you've got a couple of strips made to whatever length you need them, you're ready to start lacing them together. So to do that, you want to make sure that your strips are facing the same direction, and you can do this just by checking that your center rings here are going in the same direction. Again, it's a little bit easier if you're working right-handed to have your strip on the right up. So we're going to reverse that, and we've got our strip on the right, as we go right to left on top. We're then going to take a piece of open ring. We're going to take an open ring, and we're going to go down, down, then across to the next piece, up, up, pinch those together, close them like so, and we've got our first ring in. Next, we're going to take another open ring, and we're not going to jump to our next 4 unoccupied rings. If we did that, it would end up looking mighty weird. You'd have these gaps in between here. So we need to connect all of our rings to the preceding ring. So we're going to start with the next unoccupied ring, this one here, and we're going to go down, down, and then it goes across, up, up. I don't normally rotate around, just trying to give you the best view possible. Close, and then let it back out, and we've got a couple of pieces in here, and our rings it's starting to look like a proper weave. So if you're doing strips, this is the way to connect them, and again, in my opinion, this is the fastest way to assemble chainmail. One alternative way of doing it is to, once you've gotten your initial strip done, to add on ring by ring. So to do that, you would take, at the very beginning of a strip, 1 open ring and 2 closed rings, and go through the 2 rings here on the end, and get those connected. And you can see that kind of makes a piece of 4-in-1 hanging on the end. Once you've got that done, you're going to take an open ring and 1 piece of one closed ring, and it's going to lace on just like we do with, it's going to lace on just like with zipping up the strips. Down, down, and up, and then the open ring, or rather closed ring we're adding, creates our next up piece. And you can see we're starting to add on. And then we just continue all the way to the end of the strip doing that. I don't find this to be any easier or faster, but if it works for you, go for it, do it. So that's a couple of methods for getting your chainmail assembled. So a couple of tips, tricks, problems that you might run into. When you're working with your strips, one thing that you want to be very careful of when you are adding pieces of 4-in-1 is that you have your rings going, I said, top to bottom away from whichever way you're doing it. If you do it the opposite way, it can be really difficult to properly lace it unless you're already left-handed. Otherwise, you're going to be ending up going through your rings in an incorrect pattern, and it's not going to quite come together right. It's going to get your rings all twisted up. Another problem that you can run into is if you're just adding rings on, if you don't have your rings going the correct orientation, again, that right to left, say you've got it left to right going down, and you try to add on a piece like this, when you go to do your down, down, and pick up, it comes together, or comes apart like that. If you've got rings doing that, it's because you're trying to assemble them in the wrong orientation. So make sure you've got that going down and away from you, or away, down and away from whichever way you're linking, so that when you pick it up, it makes that little hitched looking piece there. And then you can close that, and it makes an appropriate strip. One other common problem that you can run into that's really easy to fix, but very confusing if you've never seen it before, is that when you've got strips that have loose rings, they tend to kind of want to do their own thing. So one common problem is you'll have this connecting ring kind of just loop around and end up on the wrong side. So you'll be trying to lay your chainmail out, and for some reason it's just going to look, let's mess it up again. It's just going to look kind of off or wrong, like it just won't want to lay flat correctly. So if that's the case, just take your chain and make sure that your connecting ring here hasn't flipped around and gotten all caught up. You just take that loose ring, flip it around all the others, or honestly just give it a slap down to the table. Usually it's going to take the easiest way to come back undone. Well, either way there. Well, I guess another problem you can run into is if you don't have your ring properly closed, it's going to slip off your other rings. So that's what happened here. We had a ring that wasn't fully closed, and that gap is pretty small, but it's big enough that when you line it up on another ring that has a gap, like this guy, or this one here, here we go. So these rings slipped. They've both got this gap here, and it doesn't seem much, but it's pretty easy for rings to slip through that, especially when you've got an entire weave that's pushing against each other. So that's just going to have to be disassembled. But if you find your rings slipping up really weird, you need to make sure that you don't have any gaps in your chain just like that. You can take a regular pair of pliers and just give it a gentle squeeze. Don't go too hard or you'll deform your ring, and just clinch that together. That small change is really all it takes to get your rings working right for you. And if you hand cut your rings, you're probably going to run into those gaps every now and again. If you just use your pliers and give it a pinch closed, it'll while you're weaving, it'll save you a big headache later on. Okay, so I mentioned a little bit earlier in the video that one of the easy or best ways to kind of expedite the process is to go ahead and start with closed rings. Now, you can do this by just taking your open rings. These are my truly open ones, but it'll work all the same. And you can take 2 pairs of pliers and close them, or you can save yourself the hassle of that and use something like a fork that's already fixed, put a ring in, and then use it as your second plier. So it saves you from the constant opening and closing. Even better than that, get yourself a couple of clamps or some other sort of jig and clamp your fork or other similar utensil that you don't mind using for chainmail into your vise. Get yourself a pile of closed or open rings, place it in your pliers, rotate, toss it in your clothespin. And this closes rings a heck of a lot faster than trying to close them while you're actively weaving. So best tip that I can give is to do something like this and get all of your closed rings that you need closed before you start weaving, and it'll save you a lot of time in the long run and a lot of hassle and handache. Alright, so that is how you assemble European 4-in-1. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them in the comments section below. If you found this video helpful, please be sure to like and subscribe and share it around. If you have suggestions for our next video, if you have any tips or tricks that I didn't cover that would be really helpful, please be sure to drop me a line and let me know. I love hearing from you guys. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.